Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's panel presented by Page and Panel. I'm Tyra Sweet. I'm a children's TV host and writer, and I am super excited to be here with two very, very talented writers today. And we are celebrating the launch of both of their new graphic novels. We have Stephanie Cooke with Paranorthern and Whitney Gardner with Long Distance. And I am so thrilled to be with you today and learn a little bit about your book and your processes and all that good stuff. But before we really get into it, I'm kind of hoping that both of you can give us a quick synopsis of what these new books are about. So Stephanie, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Wow, I've got this right here, conveniently just placed. So Paranorthern and the Chaos Bunny Apocalypse is about a young witch named Abby and her friends. She accidentally opens up a portal to another dimension. That dimension happens to be filled with chaos bunnies, who I liken to Stitch from Lilo and Stitch. They're not inherently evil. They're just, mischievous, and they cause a lot of destruction. So they all bust into their town of North Haven, and Abby realizes that, oh no, I've done this. Me and my friends need to figure out a way to fix this. So her friends, she's the witch, a ghost, a wolf girl, and a pumpkin head. They all team up with her to help find a way to close the portal and send the bunnies back from whence they came.
Amazing. Such an adventure. Such a fun group to follow along. And Whitney, why don't you let us know about your book?
Yes, I have mine too. Hi.
Oh, so
Long Distance is a book about a girl named Vega. She moves to Seattle from Portland, and she has to leave her very best friend behind. And she's determined that she does not need any new friends in her new city. But her parents don't really like that idea. So they sent her to camp to try and make new friends in Seattle. And when she gets to the camp, things start going wrong or weird or hinky, and she has to team up with some of the other campers there to try and figure out what's going on. And I don't think there's a better way to make friends than to be put into a potentially life-threatening situation.
absolutely. She's a little tricked into making new friends,
Yes.
I guess. Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. And so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that for both of you, this is the second graphic novel for each of you that you've written. Is that correct?
Yeah, sort of.
Yep.
Sort of. I know that
for me.
Yeah, I know that, Stephanie, for you, this is your second. And then Whitney, I know that you've illustrated a number.
Right. So I've illustrated, this will be my third graphic novel that I've illustrated. This one and Fake Blood, I wrote and illustrated, and then I have one little sneaky one in between, a nonfiction about Ruth Bader Ginsburg that I did not write.
Oh, great. Okay, gotcha. Okay, so I guess the reason that I was asking is because I'm so curious to know how the experience of writing, and Whitney, for you illustrating as well, your first graphic novels, how it's influenced the process and the experience of these newer books. So Whitney, why don't we start with you if that's all right?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I think after drawing 300 pages for the first one, going to draw the 300 pages for this one, I feel like I got a lot better at drawing. And it's kind of fun to see, like, oh, I know a lot of artists try to like hide their progression, like getting better, because I think anybody drawing pages and pages of comics, they're going to get better at it. But I kind of like seeing it and showing like, oh, she's getting better at this, or, kind of a thing. So when I finished Long Distance, I flipped through it and was like, wow, oh, okay, we leveled up somewhere in there.
That's amazing. Yeah, just like every book from here on out will just be like a timeline of progress.
Yeah, I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like people's writing changes and, improves as well, right? So of course your illustrations would too. Stephanie, what about you? What was the process or experience like on this second graphic novel?
It's funny because Paranorthern has come out second, but was actually my first graphic novel.
Oh,
So publishing is just a bit funny with its timelines, and sometimes things can take forever, as Whitney can attest to as well. I'm speaking for you.
True.
But yeah, so Paranorthern was actually my first graphic novel that I wrote. And just because things are funny, Oh My God's wound up being my debut. I co-wrote that with Insha Fitzpatrick. And then Paranorthern, months later, has now, come out into the world. But regardless of that, like I I am well aware as a writer of comics that the artist does so much work, so much more work. And, like it takes me anywhere from about like 3 to 6 months to write, the script to final draft, but it takes an artist years to complete, right? So I'm very conscious of that labor divide. And so I spent a long time practicing like short stories and speaking with other kind of artists and creators to get an idea of what they liked in their collaborators. Like, oh, do you like splash pages? Oh, do you like doing this? Do you like, what's like your maximum panel count per page? And like that sort of thing. So I tried before I sat down to write long form to kind of understand what made a good writer for my collaborators. So that being said, that's a very long-winded answer to get to. I definitely learn from each artist I work with and each designer and each editor, and I incorporate little bits and pieces into the script to hopefully make things. I hope they're better as they go along, period. But I hope for my collaborators that it makes the process fun and, seamless as possible. So yeah, I think those are kind of the big things I pay attention to, is just trying to be the best collaborator possible.
I love that. And that actually is so perfect because it kind of leads into my next question. As we've kind of mentioned, Stephanie, you're a writer, and Whitney, you're a writer and illustrator. And so I'd assume that the processes that you're going through are a little bit different. And I'm kind of curious about how they differ, because Stephanie, going into it, for you, do you have, when you're writing, do you kind of picture what these characters are going to look like? And when it does come back from the artist, like what is that process of collaboration like? And Whitney, for you, as you're writing, are you also imagining exactly what the characters are going to look like, and how do they change once you do get into illustrating? So whoever wants to start is fine.
For me, I would say when I'm writing the script, I write the script first. I don't draw the characters. I don't do any kind of drawing. I just write an outline for the story. Then I write the script, and then my editor and I will go back and forth. And only once it's nailed down will I jump into the art. But when I'm writing the script, I try to leave as much breathing room for my future self as possible, because I don't have to be super specific. I'm not trying to direct somebody's art. I just know, like, future Whitney will figure this out. Let her have some fun with it. So I like to leave everything like very open, like, and there is a chase scene or whatever. And then later I can figure out exactly how I want it to look. So I feel like if I were to write for an artist, I would have to like severely change that and start like describing things up front.
Right.
But now I kind of like leaving things a little open, giving myself some room to play with it, not knowing exactly what everybody's going to look like until I sit down. So that way there can be like surprises as I'm still working, even though the script has been edited over and over again.
Right. That totally makes sense. What about for you, Stephanie?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the project. So I think I'm about 50-50 now on going into projects either as a solo writer and then my publisher teams me up with someone, or I'm a package deal with a team and we're bringing that, to the publisher to be like, this is what we've got. But like kind of Whitney's covered, I think, the artist writer portion of things. So as a solo writer, though, when I'm kind of building the characters in my head, I can kind of draw, and sometimes I doodle out things on my own if I feel confident enough, but that's realistically not a thing that happens very often, and I don't typically share those. But I rely heavily on like Pinterest and kind of making like mood boards and aesthetics that kind of go with the character. I want my artist that comes on board to feel like it's their book too. So I don't want to over dictate what the characters are going to look like, what the vibe needs to be. I include the things that I feel are important to the character. Like, this is a specific thing that comes into the book later on. It has to be this. But other than that, I try and leave it up to the artist kind of as much as possible to, have a say. Like, for instance, again, Paranorthern, like, I didn't really have anything in mind for any of the characters. Like, it's hard not for, like, when you write Wolf Girl to not have a wolf girl, like, like Teen Wolf, but make her grunge and like awesome. And then it's hard when you write like Sentient Pumpkinhead to not get that, but like Hannah's our little ghost character here. And Hannah was pretty like up in the air. Like, I just kind of wanted her to be happy-go-lucky. I wanted her to be kind of just, a little bohemian-ish, just very friendly and airy and that sort of thing. No puns intended with ghosts. Or maybe they are. But
I was going to say, Steph, of course,
yeah,
pun intended.
they are intended. But when Mari Costa, who's the artist on Paranorthern, read the script, she reached out to our editor to say, hey, I feel like this character would really be represented well as a Latina or a Muslim character, and I'd love permission to kind of explore that in the character design. And I was like, absolutely.
What was it?
My schedule.
Your schedule's like, you need a break.
Truly. Whoops. But yeah, so Mari kind of just like went to town with that. Like, I wanted, the artist to see like the characters in a certain way and be like, great, I think this would be a good fit for them. And that's what she did. And I loved how all of them turned out. I think it's such a good cast, and like I love them all so much. So yeah, I think it's about like trying to put enough of the work in there as a writer so that your artist isn't doing like writing work of their own, or kind of trying to figure things out on their own, but then leaving enough room so that they can interpret it and put their own spin on it too.
Totally. That actually kind of reminds me a little bit of like writing for like animation. It's very similar when I go to write a script. It's like, oh, I want a fun dance scene to happen. And I'm like, maybe I'll use like a single adjective to be like, oh, a silly dance scene, because you want it to happen, but you want to leave room for whoever's illustrating and animating that to have fun and play with it and make it their own. So yeah, that totally that checks out with me, frankly.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of overlap with like comics and TV and animation. Like, you see a lot of crossover in those industries, and that's like for a very good reason. There's very similar applicable skills.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so moving on, I'm really curious about all of these characters in both of your books, and who or how they're influenced by you and your own personalities and experiences, but who else in your life they are influenced by. Whitney.
Okay, well, Vega and I are very similar in that I wrote Long Distance after moving to Canada and moving to a place where I didn't know a single person, and leaving my best friend behind, and dealing with all of those feelings of like, it's so hard to just meet people. You can't just walk up to them and be like, hey, be my friend. So, I gave her all of that anxiety that I was having. But other characters QWERTY in the book, who, you know, is one of her potential friends, has a lot of traits of my husband, who is like very high energy, very talkative, likes to fool around with robotics and makes music on Game Boys and messes with electronics and all of these things. And that is something that my husband is very into. So I gave him a lot of similar hobbies. This just a little like shout out in there.
Totally.
But I do also like to sneak little drawings of my friends in the background. Steph is in a few scenes. She's wearing a shirt that says like OMG on it for her other book. Oh my gods. Well, my best friend, whoever, you know, one of my friends is like throwing a fish in the fish market in Seattle. And it's just like, oh, little nods to people throughout the book.
That's amazing. I love that. And I love how your own experience is shown through Vega's experience in the book. It's kind of funny to think of, like, you know, us as adults making media for children, and just how applicable our own lives are to the kids experience the same drama of life in the same way. Absolutely. Stephanie, what about for you?
Yeah, I definitely put, like Whitney, like a lot of my own insecurities into the characters. And there's like definitely a lot of similar themes between my books that come up. Like I'm an only child, so like there's kind of like lonely themes that come out of the things, and just kind of like those things that I experienced growing up that I try and kind of put into the books. But Paranorthern is like a big book about friendship, and you know, like I don't want all of my characters to sound the same. And it's hard sometimes when you're writing characters to not fall into like the habit of just making it sound like you, but slightly more youthful because it's for kids. So I try to kind of pick someone in my life that like reminds me of the character. And then I kind of base some of their behaviorisms off of those friends so that it makes them feel more real, both to me and to hopefully the reader too. Like, again, I'm going to use Hannah once more because she is a character specifically, like, again, happy-go-lucky. And my friend Liz is just like the embodiment of that to me. Like, she's just a ray of sunshine. And she talks so specifically, like, it's just ray of sunshine. She just says, like, oh gosh, wow, you look great. This is great. Everything's great. Like, she's just so positive and has a silver lining to everything. So like every single thing revolving around Hannah, I was like, how would Liz tackle this? Like, how would she, you know, approach this situation? What would be her reaction to Silas's like pessimism and like all this? Silas is our pumpkin head. So I try, there's some characters, Silas is pretty easy to write because he's just grumpy and, again, like passionate about the things he's passionate about. But for other characters, I want to make sure that they have something that's not just me, and it's influenced by people around me. So that's like one specific thing. And then I think kind of other people or the other characters are a little bit of a mishmash. So
Right. Amazing. And speaking of characters, this is just kind of an aside. I'm so curious to know if you have, either from a book or a TV or a movie, like a favorite character, present or from your childhood. Oh, gotcha.
I know. I feel like both. I've been going through like a big phase. I mean, I don't think this phase ever stopped, to be honest, but I really love animated TV shows. I love cartoons. And I think we have such a golden age of that right now. Like, TV shows are doing so much and I'm just really into it. And like both Oh My Gods and Paranorthern, I think we're heavily influenced by like Gravity Falls. I love Gravity Falls so much. I love Mabel. Like, she's just so good. And like, I feel like there's bits of that I bring into it. And then like Star versus the Forces of Evil. I don't know if either of you've seen that, but I also very much love that show. And like, oh, it's so good. I love King River. It's probably like no one's favorite character but me, but like he's just so good.
Amazing.
Lately, I can't stop thinking about Kermit the Frog and the influence he has had on my entire life. And just that there are moments where Kermit the Frog is just the eternal optimist, helping, like, well, we're going to get through this. We're going to figure it out. We're going to problem solve. We're friends. We're family. But there are also moments where Kermit is just sort of quiet and sad and melancholy. And I just kind of love that about the Muppets sometimes, where you can have these like moments of like, oh yes, I totally understand what Kermit the Frog is talking about right now. I don't know, there's something about the Muppets, man, that has affected me my whole life. I just want to put something like that out into the world one day. It doesn't have to be an empire or a show or a movie or whatever. I just want that feeling of like complete craziness and joy and poignancy. I don't know. I love it.
Absolutely. There is something about puppets being like between kind of the world of like being animated and real that makes them like so real, but also so I don't know, just different and
right.
Yeah,
they can get away with things that humans cannot.
Exactly. But we're still able to connect with them because they exist in the real world. Yeah, absolutely. I am curious to know, we've talked about we have a guest.
Yeah, she's like crashed the panel and like it's like swelteringly hot, but she wants to be held, so we will be here for a moment, I'm sure.
Oh, no complaints. I'm curious to know, we've talked a little bit about your processes, and I want to know what your favorite part about the process of writing, or Whitney, in your case, illustrating, if you'd like, what your favorite part is when you're going through this very lengthy process of bringing an idea all the way to publication.
When it comes to writing, I think my favorite part is revising. And I know Steph is going to be like, what?
Yeah, I'm the opposite.
I kind of like taking this thing that like, oh, I can see the problems now and I'm going to fix them. And this thing is going to become better. But with writing, not with the art, like, oh gosh, I don't want to redraw anything ever. And with the art, my favorite part is probably coloring everything in, because all the decisions have been made. And now it's just like, oh, I've made a coloring book for myself and I get to sit down and just zone out and color things in.
Yeah, that's so fun. I hadn't even thought about the coloring process. That's amazing. And when you go to that part, are you just deciding then on all of the colors, or are they kind of like predetermined?
I predetermine. I will sit there with a piece of paper, not a piece of paper, with a document in Photoshop, and I will pick out all the colors that I will use for the book, and that will be it. So I have like a limited, because it's usually like 50 or 60 colors, but those are the only ones. I will not stray. That's my box of crayons.
I love that. Kind of like for consistency of
so it feels like it all belongs together.
Yeah, absolutely. What about for you, Stephanie? What's your favorite part?
I think, again, Whitney's covered what I hate the most, but I like actually outlining. Like, the writing can be really fun, but outlining is really important. Okay, you need to go. Outlining is so important, and it kind of gets like overlooked, I think, in the process sometimes. And for me, tackling something point form that's like the entirety of the story, and then going through and like kind of figuring out, it's like a puzzle. You're figuring out the bits that work, that don't work, where it needs to kind of move to a different place, and working on that to build the skeleton of your story is really satisfying. It's just, obviously then you have to still write the thing, but it's really rewarding to kind of just be like, okay, I have the beginning, a couple pieces in the middle, and then, bits and bobs here and there. I know I want to include this thing. I want to include this moment. But then your characters, as you build that and you get to know your characters a little bit better, they kind of start talking to you in a way and being like, oh no, like, I need this in my arc. I need like this. And you're like, oh, right, you do need that. And it's just kind of fun because it's like getting to know a friend in a way. It makes you sound a little bit like bananas, but like you get to know these people in such a intimate way and bring them to life. So it's kind of that fun process of a new person in your life and, that like honeymoon phase where you're just like, oh my God, what are you into? Stop. No, what? It's just delightful.
It's the beginning, so it's all magical and possibilities and potential.
Exactly.
And nobody has said anything about it yet. It's just like this fun thing in your mind. I totally get that.
And your editor's going to tell you it's perfect and it's all going to come together and there's no notes whatsoever.
Never.
Never.
I love that. Now that you bring that up and all this time that you spend with the characters and hearing them kind of talk to you, I'm so curious. Have you ever had a dream where your character appears?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know.
I don't think I have.
I think I have like job related dreams where like when I worked at like FedEx at the warehouse, like the conveyor belt wouldn't stop and the boxes just kept coming and and I get like anxiety dreams where it's like, oh no, I've missed my deadline. I'm fired from the book. But I don't know that like the characters have ever kind of come into my dreams. I haven't really been having vivid dreams lately though. So maybe that has something to do with it. Tonight I'm going to wind up having bonkers dreams about everyone though.
And so Stephanie, you brought out the outline part of the process. I'm curious for both of you, when you're going to outline, where do you start? I know that some people like to start at the beginning, some people like to start in the middle, maybe the end. Where are both of you starting in that process?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think I was actually just watching somebody else's process video on this today. Gwenda Bond is an amazing writer. But she was talking about this and I was like, oh, interesting. I kind of tend to do like a bullet point system where like I just make like several pages of bullet points and then just start kind of dropping things in here and there. Sometimes I have a beginning, sometimes I have the ending only, sometimes I have like something for a completely random part of the story, but I know it's like somewhere between the middle and like the end. So I don't necessarily start with at any particular place. It's all kind of, I personally like to kind of just, I have the general idea of the story in my head and I ask myself questions to kind of fill in the blanks. It's like, what do I need to start this adventure? Like, what's their goal? What are the characters trying to achieve? What, does their success or their failure look like? What kind of insecurities does that come with? And you kind of just start filling in little bits of the story based on the questions that you have and that you answer, because you want to explore those emotional arcs for the characters and make sure that you're kind of touching on some of those things if that's what your story is about. So as you answer those things, you're like, oh, that would be a good moment for here. And I think it's a lot like a puzzle. Gwenda in her thing was saying, get a cork board or get, some like sticky notes for the wall and write all the notes down and then like, paste it around. And that's similar, I guess, to what I do, but I just kind of do it in a digital format, usually with bullet points.
Right. So taking all of these different moments and then deciding where they kind of all go in that timeline.
Yeah, exactly. And then just kind of reworking it, because it's like much easier to edit your story when it's like 3 or 4 pages long in bullet points than it is to edit 300 pages, right?
Right.
It's definitely best to get it in good shape at that point. For me, again, Whitney loves revising, so give her all the revisions. But yeah, like it's just easier for me to kind of get it in its best final form before taking it to the scripting process.
Right. Okay. Amazing. And what about for you, Whitney?
I don't know, like I'm a chronological person. I know that people will be like, I start with the middle, or I have an ending. I'm like, how do you have an ending before the beginning? It makes no sense to me. It's like this weird Jenga tower that all these authors like work for their outlines. And that's terrifying to me. I will make a very loose bullet points, like Steph said. And then sometimes I don't even follow it. I'm just like, this is what I think the story is going to be. And I kind of just use that in the back of my mind. So I don't have a point where I'm writing and I'm like, but I don't know what's going to happen. It's like, no, you do. You plan this out. Most of the time, the book ends up looking very different from what I had planned. And when I go to start writing, I usually write the beginning of the book over and over and over again until I really understand like who I'm dealing with and what the story is actually about. Because sometimes I go in thinking it's one thing and it ends up becoming something else. So once I get those like first 50 pages like really nailed in, the rest sort of follow very quickly. But I always just, the beginning, you got to start at the beginning. I have to start at the beginning.
Amazing. I have kind of about that, and the idea of going into it thinking it's one thing and then it turns out to be something completely different. I know for me personally, when I'm working on personal projects, if I'm creating my own shows or that sort of thing, I'll have a group of other TV writers where we'll get together and we'll read each other's stuff and kind of be like, oh, this is what I thought it was about, and then you're kind of like, that wasn't what I was planning at all, actually. And getting that feedback from multiple people and being like, oh, maybe I've been writing something and didn't even know what I was writing about. Is that ever, I know that like writing is can be such like an isolated process. What is do you have people or other writers that you kind of bounce things off of? Obviously you have editors and publishers that you work with, but either now or like previously, before the fame, like what have you had other people in your life kind of work with you or give you feedback, and what was that like?
Yeah, I think, oh, do you want to, you can,
Whichever.
I think like I use my partner a lot to bounce ideas around with. Like he writes too, and like I'll be like, is this a thing? Blah blah blah. And sometimes I just need to verbalize it. Like sometimes he's just sitting there and he's just like nodding along. Like he doesn't contribute anything to the conversation. I just need somebody to like talk at. And he's really great at, either just letting me word vomit at him while I kind of figure the things out. But then he's also just great for helping me figure out those questions. Like, well, what are you trying to achieve? Like, what is this supposed to happen? Like, have you thought about this plot hole? And I'm just like, no. And yeah, he's really great for that. And like, he's spent a lot of weekends at the library with me while we just write, and I try and make my deadlines and then randomly like, does this make sense? And like give him no context whatsoever. But I'm trying to be better also about reaching out to my peers. There's like, I think a fear sometimes, oh, if I put this out there, somebody might tell me that it's not good, or, what if somebody steals my idea? What if this? What if that? And I'm really trying to get through or over those kind of hindering thoughts, because it's not helpful to just keep your stories to yourself and not get feedback from people. Like I think your stories get better when people around you and people that you respect poke holes in your story and call you on stuff that you didn't otherwise realize. And I think that's a really important part of growing as a creator. So I'm trying to be better about that aspect of it, aside from, again, just my poor partner. But yeah, it's daunting sometimes to share something because like stories in their own ways are deeply personal, and it can be really scary to put yourself out there. So
Yes, absolutely. Very vulnerable.
True. So when I started before the fame, I had a bi-weekly critique group that used to meet up, and we'd bring 10 pages and we'd swap and we'd give each other feedback. And that was a really amazing way to be held accountable to a group of people. And it's like, if I don't bring pages, that's kind of embarrassing. I have to write new pages because I don't want to be the one that shows up with no work. So it's a great way of having, like, you know, you don't have a teacher or a boss or an editor or anyone yet. I didn't even have an agent at that point. So it was just like, okay, these people are the people I'm doing this work for. Got to do it, got to finish it. Don't want to be embarrassed by not having work. And then not only does it help when people give you feedback or poke holes, or sometimes they'll give you like a big what if this happens, and you could say, oh, that's amazing, or oh, that's really not it. And even knowing that that's not it kind of helps. Like, okay, well, I know that that's never going to happen. We don't need to go down that direction. What about this? But it also helps you become a better writer by looking at everybody else's work and giving them feedback and helping them make their work stronger, hopefully. And I really, really enjoyed having that group, and we've all gone separate ways. I still have one that I trust very much that we will trade our pages every now and again with, or we'll like write to each other and be like, should we hold each other accountable this week? But yeah, I'm all for, as a person who likes revising, I'm all for critique partners and trying to make your work as good as it can be before I show it to big, important people.
Right.
Not that my critique partners aren't big and important. They are my heart. And I'm trusting them probably more than my editor, more than my agent, because they're seeing my work at its messiest.
Right.
But very helpful. Also, like, helps you get a tougher skin.
Absolutely.
That way their gentle criticism, helps you get used to it. And then the harsher stuff, hopefully not too harsh, comes along. You're like, okay, yes, I'm prepared. I knew this was coming.
Right. Absolutely. Amazing. Thanks for sharing. Okay. Here's a question for you. Would you rather sneeze cheese or chocolate? We're kind of like Cheese Whiz, or kind of like, I don't know, like a Nesquik Nutella kind of situation.
Ooh.
Oh.
Sneeze. It's like coming out your nose.
Yeah.
I might have to go with chocolate purely because it smells better than cheese.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if it's going to be like all up in there, like definitely not the color you want coming out.
Right.
But the scent itself might be a more pleasant experience.
Yes.
Okay.
I think the same. Also, like, me and cheese, I love cheese, but we're like not friends all the time. But like, chocolate just seems slightly more appealing. And like, it's like, oh, you're just sneezing chocolate. Whereas like, I don't know, if you're sneezing cheese, they'd be like, are you okay? Like, that looks like a sinus infection. I don't know. Like, people probably just don't look healthy, but I feel like chocolate.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like I would have to choose the same. Like you said, Whitney, like the smell in the end probably would be a little bit nicer. The cleanup is a little iffy, I think, but worth it for not having to smell cheese all day. Not that I don't like, I love cheese, but
Exactly.
And also, how many times are you sneezing in a day? Like you're doing over and over, like maybe you will smell cheese all day.
Yeah, I'm like allergic to my cat. that I like clearly wants to snuggle all the time. So like I sneeze more than I would like to.
Okay. Yeah. So you have to take that into account too, of course.
Yeah. So I think chocolate for sure.
Okay. Amazing. I'm glad that we got through with that one. We'll wrap up quite soon, but we talked a little bit earlier about, characters that you like, but I'm curious to know about your influences, your media influences from, what books and shows you were reading as kids and how that influences your writing now, and the stories that you're telling now. If you have a favorite book or favorite author or a favorite show or anything like that that you'd like to share. Whitney, do you want to go?
Well, we went over the Muppets pretty extensively.
Yes.
I think the book that really got me into, I didn't really like reading a lot as a kid. I loved picture books. I liked any books with pictures. There wasn't like a huge market for kids comics when I was growing up, so comics weren't really available to me in that way. But in 7th grade, I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And it kind of just like spoke to me in this way of like, oh my gosh, I thought all books without pictures have to be these big, serious things, like heavy subjects, like where the red fern grows and they make you cry. And like books are not, that's not my vibe. And then I read this book and I was cracking up, and it was so funny and so different and so weird that it kind of changed my thinking into like, oh, books can be very different than what I thought. And so I try now to make books for kids who are like me, who might not be super into reading. So like that they're going to be something a little wacky or out there or different. And all of my books have pictures, even the novels. So
amazing. Stephanie?
Yeah. So I'll start with media, because like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the sitcom, was a huge influence on my life. Like we wrote Oh My Gods and I hadn't watched Sabrina in years, but I, during the pandemic, went back and rewatched all of it. And I realized Karen's journey and Sabrina's journey are very similar. Like Karen is like in deep denial that she's in Mount Olympus, and like Sabrina's like in deep denial that she's like an actual witch. Like she just thinks her family. And I'm like, did I just like, is this just Sabrina? So like it just like stuck in there. Plus like Salem and like the puns and stuff is just very on brand for my sense of humor. Monty Python was a huge thing for me too. I didn't really watch TV. Like TGIF was like the thing my family would watch together. And that was like an exception. We can watch TV because it's as a family. And then when we did watch movies and stuff, like it was very much like my dad being like, this is what I like. Would you like this also? And so, there's like a lot of those things that I remember fondly, like my dad watching me be like, does she get this? And so like the Holy Grail, like the bunny, the killer rabbit in the Holy Grail is obviously very similar to the Chaos Bunnies. And that definitely was a huge influence too. But then book wise, I was a big reader. I grew up in a small town. Again, I'm an like only child, but my town pretty much had a library, a post office, and like a store. Like that was it. So I spent all this time at the library and I would just read constantly. And so I definitely had a range of books I liked, but The Golden Compass was one of those books that like I was really enamored with things that took you to other places and like the hidden worlds. That was a big theme with me, like that I loved. I was like, oh, where is this closet Narnia? Like, take me away. And then there's like more humorous things as I kind of grew up. Like, I don't know if anyone knew or read this book, The Diary of Adrian Mole.
Oh, that's my favorite. That's my favorite.
So good. And like Whitney, it was like, oh, books can be funny and kind of just like weird. And, like this kid is not likable really in any way, shape, or form. And it kind of just changed how I saw writing and like what you could put in a book. And there's a similar book, I think, too, called Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging. And those kind of just made me realize that, again, books could be funny. So yeah, there's a big gamut of things that influenced me over the years.
Yeah. And it sounds like for both of you, there's kind of like you've said, like otherworldly, paranormal influences, and obviously that is showing up in your books. How do you kind of incorporate things like that into your writing, where you're writing characters that exist, you know, kind of like in a familiar world to us, or you know, our world, but how do you kind of go about and kind of contain as well, like the creative decisions that you make to kind of mix in fantasized worlds, if you will?
I think like I've heard a lot of people say when you're writing fantasy and fiction or kind of things that are otherwise fantastical, you have to nail the bits that are grounded in realism. Like you have to make sure you nail the characters, and you have to kind of, if you do have things influenced by the real world, those things have to be, they have to feel real. And then everything else kind of falls into place. Like it's like, oh, this makes sense to me. Sure. Yeah. Bunnies that are like taking over the world. Totally. Like it goes hand in hand, like when you nail one, but like when you mess up something that is based in reality, people are less likely to believe you. They're like, that's not how things work, you know?
Mm.
So they're more likely to kind of be along for the ride if you do your research on the things that you can do your research on. Obviously, that's not always applicable, because sometimes you're just writing about completely different worlds or aliens from outer space or whatever. But I think it's important regardless to make sure your characters remain relatable and to have things in there that connect with whoever's reading your book. And those are the things that people will kind of just wind up loving, and then everything else is just like, oh, this is fun, this is a fun adventure, I like this. So yeah.
I kind of love that cryptozoology thing of like, is Bigfoot real? Is he not real? Do aliens exist? Do they not? Is there such thing as a vampire? Like, so when I'm writing these stories, or like, to me, I love the idea of this, like, yes, it's our world. And if you just look under this corner, there's something there. Like, is it real? Did this really happen? Did it not? I don't know. Like, I kind of like playing with that. It kind of makes the fantastic feel a little more possible, or a little more actual. So having vampires and fake blood is really fun. Doing the alien stuff and Long Distance, very fun. Although I do have a lot of science facts, like about geodes and thunder eggs and how to use a sextant, like all these things. So when it came to, spoiler alert, lots of alien technology showing up later, my copy editor's like, how would this really work in real life? And I'm like, really? You need me to figure this out? I mean, can't I just? And so I have one of the characters be like, I don't know, it's alien technology. Because at some point, I'm like, at some point, I guess I've gone too far in mixing the real and the fake here. If like we're really poking holes in like how a space station like this would actually run, because I am not a scientist or an alien. But I don't know. That's kind of like the line I like to play with, of like, oh, maybe this could be real. Or a kid starts reading a book and they think it's about one thing, and then, oh, like this fun extra element is thrown into the mix.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of sounds like you're both saying, like, you know, like you're creating a world where, you know, lots of things here make sense and are familiar, but wait a second, here's like one little thing to kind of twist it on it, or turn it on its head, excuse me. Amazing. Well, I've had the best time talking to both of you. Your
Yeah.
books are amazing. I can't wait for everyone to read them. And just before we wrap up, I'm just wondering if you'd like to share any final thoughts, or maybe what you're hoping people will take away from your books.
Final thoughts. I'm hoping that it was kind of a weird coincidence. I don't know, that I wrote this book about keeping your friends who are long distance, or like having long distance friends. And then the pandemic happened and we all became long distance friends. So I would hope that if someone's reading this book, they can see that, like, oh, even if my friends are far away, or even if something happens and we can only meet on Zoom or whatever, that doesn't make them any less my friend. And we can still connect with each other in a myriad of ways, no matter the distance. And yeah, that's sort of my vibe with this book.
It's perfect. It really is funny timing that everyone will be reading this as we're kind of on our way out, if you will, of this experience. Yeah, exactly. Fingers crossed. Stephanie, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, Whitney's is like profound and nice. I just want to make people laugh. Like I hope people get something out of it that's more, and they pick up on the themes, and they like the power of friendship and all that stuff too. But I just hope that people pick this up and have fun, and they find a way to escape to another world for a little bit, in the way that books were an escape for me as a kid. So I just want that for whoever picks this book up.
Amazing. I love that. Thank you again to both of you for taking the time to share all of this amazing, experiences that you've had writing these books, and the experiences you've had in your childhood. We've really kind of run the gamut here.
Yes.
So thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. And both of your books, Paranorthern and Long Distance, are available at Page and Panel. They're plentiful, and they're beautiful, and they will look great on your bookshelf and in your hands with your eyes on them.
And we have little bunny pins too. I'm going to be dropping some off at Page and Panel. So if you buy the book from Page and Panel, you'll get a little chaos bunny pin.
So cute.
Oh my gosh, that is adorable. How could you not?
And thank you for being such a gracious host.
Oh, it is my pleasure. I've had the best time. You two are awesome.
Aww.
All right. Shall we?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.